through all these topics. We're almost done with this. We've looked at the history of evolution, the skeptics, Darwinian skeptics today, natural selection, mutations, vestigial organs, peppered moth, embryo development, ape men, the fossil record, billions of years, homology, the Miller experiment, bird evolution, and now we are on horse evolution. So we will look at this. The evolution of the horse supposedly began with a small dog-sized creature with 3 toes. Down at the bottom, the little dog-like creature gradually evolved into the modern horse with 1 toe. So it has 3. You can see the pictures there. It changed at the second from the top as it starts kind of the way they paint it anyway, which they have no idea what it actually looked like. But the way they paint it, it looks like that's what a deer's coat looks like, a young deer, like a fawn. And then, it morphed into starting to turn into a zebra. And then at the top, you have a horse. The first supposed horse is the Hyracotherium. The fossil was discovered in 1841 by Richard Owen, who considered it a type of hyrax. Owen did not believe in Darwin's evolution, so he thought it was a type of hyrax, one of these things here. 35 years later, Othniel Marsh, an evolutionist, named it the Eohippus or Dawn horse, after he and Thomas Huxley decided that it was the precursor to the horse. Now, if you remember Thomas Huxley, he's called Darwin's bulldog, right? He's the one that really perpetuated and fought hard for evolution, and Darwin's on the origin of species. Okay, Marsh displayed the first horse series at Yale University's Peabody Museum in 1879. The Peabody Museum still has a horse evolution display, and that's how they have it. It gets from smaller to larger. The modern horse, the first horse. A model of the supposed first horse. There it is. You can see with the 3 toes. They give it a coat like a horse has. The Chicago Field Museum has a large horse evolution display. From little to leggy is what they say. So as we look at horse evolution, we're going to look at these points. It's simply an exercise in homology. Evolutionists know that the horse chart is inaccurate. They know that. The various types of horses coexist in the fossil record. There's no reason to consider Hyracotherium any type of horse, and to arrange horses in evolutionary order by size and differences ignores the fact that modern horses come in a wide variety of sizes. So first, an exercise in homology. The only evidence is the vague similarity of the creatures when arranged in a certain order. It is impossible to prove evolution from bones. There is no scientific reason not to believe that each of the fossilized creatures was created by God. The bones can't provide this information one way or the other. How can they? How can the bones prove anything? Prove that they're a transitional species? How can they prove that? Well, how do we even know they had children? That's the thing. You don't know that. They're just bones. Ancestry and descent are not applicable in the fossil record. Is Archaeopteryx the ancestor of all birds? Perhaps yes, perhaps no. There is no way of answering the question. Now look who said this. Colin Patterson, a senior paleontologist at the British Museum of Natural History. He's the one saying this. I don't know if he's a creationist or not, but I doubt it. He's probably an evolutionist, but he says ancestry and descent are not applicable in the fossil record. You can't know. There's no way of answering the question. It is easy enough, he goes on to say, it is easy enough to make up stories of how one form gave rise to another, but such stories are not part of science, for there is no way of putting them to the test. So whoever he is, whatever he is, I respect his opinion because that's it. There's no way of knowing, he says. They're not part of science. There's no way of putting them to the test. You can't test it. Number 2, evolutionists know that the horse chart is inaccurate. George Simpson, he says, the transformation of Hyracotherium into Equus, so dear to the heart of generations of textbook writers, never happened in nature. He's saying, this chart that they show you, he says, that's never happened in nature. They never found it. It doesn't exist. Niles Eldridge, American Museum of Natural History. The exhibit on horse evolution has been presented as literal truth in textbook after textbook. I think that is lamentable. So that those pictures we see, they're presented as literal truth in everyone's textbook, and he's saying this is lamentable. Report on a 4-day meeting of evolutionists at the Chicago Field Museum in 1980. I thought this was interesting. The popularly told example of horse evolution has long been known to be wrong. Instead of gradual change, listen to this. Fossils of each species appear fully distinct, persist unchanged, and then become extinct. That's creation. That's creation. This is how God did it. They're just here and they're extinct. If they're not here, they're extinct. That's it. They come fully formed. So that was the 4-day meeting of evolutionists at the Chicago Field Museum, and this is what they concluded at the end of that. 3, the various types of horses coexist in the fossil record. In one fossil graveyard in northeastern Nebraska, they found 5 species of horses coexisting in one time and place, including 3-toed and 1-toed. What do you know? This shows that one type of horse is not older than the others, and they did not evolve from one another because they're all there together. Number 4. See, this stuff, like, no one heard any of this in school, did you? Like, if you went to public school, you did not hear this, did you? No, they don't teach this. They're not teaching this. At least give all the facts and then, let people make up their mind. Then start to teach some critical thinking skills. But that's not. I'll just give you my opinion on public school is a huge form of indoctrination. Okay, and I could go off on a whole tangent of things that they indoctrinate with, but just this is an example of it. It's anti-God. It's anti-God because all of this teaches us is not to believe in God. It's the devil showing up saying, yea, hath God said. It's anti-God, and this is what, we send, our children off to learn, to be taught. And then we wonder why they leave the faith when they're getting both sides of the story. They're hearing in Sunday school, they're hearing one thing, and then they go to school for Sunday schools, an hour, maybe a week, and then they're in school for how many hours a day? 6-7 hours a day, 5 days a week, getting this thrown at them all the time, constantly. And then parents are like, that's not real. And they're like, well, science says it is. And they're not getting the other side of it. They're not showing them both sides. Number 4, there's no reason to consider Hyracotherium any type of horse. The reconstructions of Hyracotherium are designed to make the creature look as horse-like as possible. So here's, the artist's rendering of it. And I said, they get good artists and people that can make good models, and it makes it believable. Different ideas. See, that one's looking more horse-like, right? Is it, you see the shape of the face changing to look more like a horse, just shorter. The front shoulders look more like horse muscles. Galloping like a horse. Living in herds like horses. How do they know all this from bones? It's just interesting. Artist's depiction of them. But if we look at the actual skeleton reconstruction, we see that its back legs were much longer than its front legs. It is obvious that it looked and moved nothing like a horse. Look how long its back legs are in comparison to its front legs. And imagine that thing's going to be down like this. Horses are not at all like that, but that's how far that thing's going to be facing down. Notice the hind legs, the difference is just the angles and everything. The Hyracotherium versus a horse skeleton. The front legs, different. The spine. The Hyracotherium probably looked even less horse-like than this drawing. Because when you saw how tall the front legs were, it's going to be pitched even more. I mean, how tall the rear legs were. It's going to be pitched forward even more than that. Here's a correct reconstruction of the skeleton, but it is displayed in an unrealistic manner to make it appear horse-like. Why would they put it like that? Because you picture horses jumping, right? I mean, they have competitions like that where horses jump different levels, different heights, right? But look at how long those rear legs are versus the front. Could you imagine how far down that thing would be? So this is not science, it is myth-making. Okay, and again, this is why I say evolution should be classified as a religion, not science, because it's a faith system, it's a belief system. They believe it. Okay, that's where they're at. Number 5, to arrange horses in evolutionary order ignores the fact that modern horses come in a wide variety. I mean, just look at that. From the draft horse, which weighs nearly 3,000 pounds and stands 7 feet tall, to the miniature horse Thumbelina that weighs 57 pounds and stands 17 inches. But you can tell they're horses. All right, those are horses. Like, obviously, that's a horse. Both of them are horses. You can see it. Looking at this thing, like, what is that? Why would we think that's a horse? That. And again, these are even artists rendering who are trying to make you think it's a horse. Horse evolution is a myth. Genesis 1:24, and God said, let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, the beast of the earth after his kind, and it was so. And so this is how God works. God brought it forth. God created it as is, just like those evolutionists at that 1980, gathering of evolutionists. They said, no, they come fully formed. This is how they come, because this is how God created them. This is what we see. So God brings forth after his kind. Again, it's important we recognize that God brings forth after his kind. Okay, he didn't have to create every single variety of horse that we see. He just needed to create a horse. And then from that, then we have microevolution, right? There's change within a kind. Okay? I mean, he started with just one man and one woman, Adam and Eve. And even Eve came from the man. So he started with one, and look at all the variety of people that we have today. Look at the vast variety within mankind that you see today. Yet it's obvious we're all human. All right, that's very obvious, but there's such a difference, okay? Well, same thing with horses. God works by creating after his kind. All right. So continuing on, we just finished horse evolution. Now we'll look at whale evolution. Probably finish this today, and then we'll be a couple weeks, I think, on icons of creation. Maybe a week, maybe two. Whale evolution. This one is like, oh my goodness, how do they even come up with this stuff? How do they even believe this? I mean, I wonder if they're in a back room, like drinking and having cigars and laughing that they're gonna dupe people with this stuff. When we get into this, like, I mean, just they're there with an evil laugh, like is what I picture. Like, this is so ridiculous when we look at some of this stuff. All right, well, they'll jump into this. In the first edition of On the Origin of Species, Darwin speculated that the whale evolved from the bear. Because that's the first thing you think when you see a bear, right? That must have turned into a whale. Darwin, I can see no difficulty. What in the world, man? I can see no difficulty in a race of bears being rendered by natural selection more and more aquatic in their structure and habits, with larger and larger mouths till a creature was produced as monstrous as a whale. What in the world are you thinking? That's just crazy to me. Today, most evolutionists believe that the whale evolved from a wolf-like animal called a Masonix or a Sononyx, something like that. Here it is, right here. This chart at the Pacific Science Center in Seattle depicts all of the whales descending from a little Masonix creature. Does that make any sense? That is ridiculous. I can't even wrap my mind around that. Let me see. I want us to look at a verse here real quick. I can't remember the reference, so I'm going to look it up. Give me a second. Go to 2 Corinthians chapter 4. 2 Corinthians 4:3. Yes, sir. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 3 says, but if our gospel be hid, it is hid to them that are lost. And here's what I want to focus on kind of is this next statement. And whom the God of this world hath blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them. For we preach not ourselves, but Christ Jesus the Lord, and ourselves your servants for Jesus' sake. For God, who commanded the light to shine out of darkness, hath shined in our hearts, to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. So the God of this world, it says, has blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ should shine unto them. This is darkness right here. This is darkness. This is blinding people's minds so they don't see the gospel. Because it's logical that if evolution took place, then what the Bible says in Genesis has to be false. Like, in my mind, for me personally, there's no reconciling the two. If evolution is true, then what the Bible says in Genesis very plainly, that God created everything, is not. So that's being used to blind people's minds to the gospel, to salvation. And they're in darkness, and you think, well, how could they even believe something so foolish? Because their minds are blinded by the God of this world. People will believe anything before they want to accept the truth. Think about your own life when you've been in sin, when you've been wrong, and the lies you will tell yourself to continue in your sin. Think about the lies you'll tell yourself to continue in your sin. You'll believe anything but the truth when you want to do wrong. Why would it be any different for them? See, this is why we must preach truth, why we need to submit ourselves to truth so we don't end up in darkness. Because once you step into darkness, you don't know where you're going. And that's the thing that so many Christians do not believe. I can stand up here and say it till I'm blue in the face. I've been saying it for over a decade, but Christians don't believe it. That when you step into darkness, there's no telling where you will go. You will do things you never thought you would do. You'll do things you said, I will never do that. You will do them once you go into darkness. If you stay there long enough, if you play around in it, because you don't know where you're going. The worst, most vile thing you can think of, you're capable of. And I'm telling you right now, there's people in this room right now, you don't believe me about that. You do not believe me about that, but it's a truth. Read your Bible and look at what mankind has done. Look what men have done. Look what the wisest man that ever lived, Solomon, look at what he did. Look at the depths that he went to. Horrible. He did horrible things because he started off going in darkness. And I'm telling you, it's the same for us. It's no different for anyone in here. We are capable of anything. Anything. And some of you say, yeah, I believe that. Not for me, though. That's other people are capable, not me. We'll lie to ourselves. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? God knows it, but you'll deceive yourself. Your own heart will deceive you. Your own heart will lie to you. And I'm telling you right now, 100% guarantee, I guarantee someone in here doesn't believe what I'm saying. Guarantee. You have to learn the hard way. How do they get off in all this, though? Because they walk in darkness. So, of course, why wouldn't they believe this? A reconstruction of the Masonics at the British Museum of Natural History. So that's kind of what it looked like. Let me just kind of go back to this thought, how they end up believing this. Have you ever been in an argument with somebody and you are like dead set, I am right in this thing, I know I'm right, and partway through that argument they say something and the light bulb turns on and you're like, man, I'm wrong. Does that ever happen to you? Yeah, some of you are like, I've never been wrong, so no, but the rest of us, that's happened to us before, right? And then have you continued to argue the wrong thing because you didn't want to admit you were wrong? Right? Right? Pride. It's a crazy thing, isn't it? I mean, that's never happened to me because I'm never wrong, but I'm just kidding. All right. I'm wrong more often than I like to admit. It's all the time. So a reconstruction of the Masonics at the British Museum. That's what it looked like. A reconstruction of the Synonics. So this is the Masonics. This is the Synonics at the University of Michigan Museum. That thing looks like it's got a pit bull head and, I don't know, a Doberman mouth or something. I'm not sure. So the story of whale evolution hasn't changed much since Darwin. The only switch has been from a bear to a wolf. Consider the following just so story from National Geographic. All right, this is National Geographic, right? Big time publication, right? The whale's ascendancy to sovereign size apparently began 60 million. Apparently. We don't know it. Apparently this happened. I mean, we could throw anything out there and just word it right and everyone's going to believe it. So it began its ascendancy to sovereign size apparently 60 million years ago when hairy, four-legged mammals in search of food or sanctuary, right? Because every four-legged mammal, two-legged mammal, when they're looking for sanctuary, we run to the water, right? We go to the water and want to take a long swim. No, we run from water, right? I mean, yeah, we need it to drink, but we're not like looking to go live in water. This is, my goodness, just the lack of critical thinking that happens in this stuff. Anyway, so in search of food or sanctuary, ventured into the water. As eons passed, there it is. That's a magic term. That's a magic word right there. As eons passed, there it is. Just indefinable amount of time. And then, of course, well, I guess with that much time it could happen. I remember thinking that as a child, getting taught this. I guess with that much time it could have happened. What do I know? It's my teacher who I trust is telling me this. As eons passed, changes slowly occurred. And there it is. So you go from that dog to a sperm whale to a blue whale, killer whale, dolphins. That was National Geographic, 1976. Hind legs disappeared. Front legs changed into flippers, amazingly. Hair gave way to a thick, smooth blanket of blubber. Nostrils, all on their own, moved to the top of the head. The tail broadened into flukes. And in the buoyant water world, look, this is it. It was the buoyant water world. The body became enormous. Hey, if you're looking to lose weight, don't hang out in the buoyant water. Okay? I'm just saying, look what happened, right? Thus, evolutionists would have us believe that a little wolf-like creature became the great blue whale, weighing 360,000 pounds. Look at that thing. Look at how huge that is. And look what's next to it. A rhino and an elephant. Man, those things look tiny next to that blue whale. But that came from a dog, just so you know. That's insane. Okay. Whale missing links. The display at the University of Michigan Museum is typical. It shows the wolf-like creature evolving into the Ambulocetus, then the Rhodocetus, then the Dorodon, then the Basilosaurus. So there it is. See, if we just keep it kind of looking similar, one part of it looking similar, then it'll make sense. So we get good artists, and look at, there you go. That's exactly how it happened. Now, they've never found any of those, but no one needs to know that. So whale evolution, the reconstructions have not been scientifically honest. There is a mere exercise in homology. Number 3, there are creatures today that live on land and in the water. 4, consider how miraculous it would be for a wolf to evolve into a whale. And 5, vestigial hind legs is a myth. All right, the reconstructions have not been scientifically honest. Rhodocetus, it is depicted in museums and textbooks as a creature with some whale-like features, such as a whale-like tail or fluke and flippers. So there it is. That's how it's picturing it, but you can see it. Oh, you see how it's got those rear flippers kind of going like their legs and then going back, but it turns to flippers instead of feet. I mean, this is how it's making it, it's picturing it for us. Rhodocetus, in 2007, interviewed Dr. Phil Gingrich, who oversaw the previous drawing for the University Museum, this one, admitted that there is no fossil evidence for the features that are key for the evolution story. He's admitting we're lying. Okay? He admitted. There's no evidence. We just made it up. The interview was conducted by Carl Werner for the excellent documentary, Evolution, the Great Experiment. Dr. Gingrich admitted, we don't have the tail in Rhodocetus. We don't know for certain whether it had a ball vertebrate indicating a fluke or not. So I speculated that it might have had a fluke. That's what he said during the interview. He speculated. Since then, we have found the forelimbs, the hands, and the front arms of Rhodocetus, and we understand that it doesn't have the kind of arms that can be spread out like flippers. If you don't have flippers, I don't think you can have a fluked tail. So they found the forelimbs, and it's an impossibility. Yet for this same documentary, Dr. Werner interviewed Dr. Taseer Hussain, who works at the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History, and she used Rhodocetus as evidence for whale evolution. So there she is using it. He's saying it's a farce. We made it up. There's no evidence for it. And she's using it for evidence. So even within that community, they're still perpetuating the lie. Pachycetus. For a 2001 PBS series entitled Evolution, Dr. Gingrich drew an illustration of the Pachycetus swimming underwater like a whale, with paws that look like fins and a stumpy tail, allegedly on its way to changing into a fluke. Okay, so there's the drawing. Gingrich claimed that in its morphology, Pachycetus is perfectly intermediate, a missing link between earlier land mammals and later full-fledged whales. So in Natural History of April 94. But further fossil finds prove that it was strictly a land animal. The new drawing of Pachycetus is a dog-like animal with a pointy snout and long tail. It is not a missing link. So that's what the actual evidence shows. Here's what the imagination created to perpetuate the myth. Okay? This is why I say somebody's worldview matters. Like how you look at the world, how you view things. If you view this as truth, then you're going to see it one way, and you should look for honest evidence and follow the evidence where it leads. Okay, that's what we should do. We should want to follow truth. Okay? If you don't want to submit to the Word of God, you've been brought up on this, then you're going to be willing to deceive people to continue to perpetuate a myth. And I wonder if we could sit down with a lot of these people that are so anti-God. Most of the time when I come across someone that's like super anti-God, I just want to sit down and ask them, like, who hurt you? What happened to you? What happened in your life that you hate God so much? And I can't say for certain, but I imagine in a good many cases, they were hurt somewhere along the line. Some form of abuse or something happened to them that they just are mad at God about it. But I can't prove that. Basilosaurus. This has been featured in many textbooks and museums as a missing link in whale evolution. It was probably a cold-blooded reptile. That means that it could have had nothing to do with whale evolution of the whale, because the whale is a mammal that supposedly evolved from land animals. So there's that one. Further, it doesn't appear in the fossil record until after the whale supposedly evolved. So how could it be a precursor to them, right? Number 2, this is a mere exercise in homology. Evolutionary descent cannot be proven from fossils. If you remove the evolutionary assumption, there is zero evidence that a wolf became a whale. You just have to assume it, okay, that this is what happened. So, as creationists, what is an assumption we're coming to it with? Like, we need to be honest with ourselves. We have assumptions as well, right? What's the major assumption we're coming with? I gave it away in the question. That God created it. Okay, that's the assumption we're coming with, is that God created it. But that's honesty. We have assumptions too. Our worldview dictates that, right? Okay. There's no scientific evidence in the fossil record that disproves creation. Okay, so there's no scientific evidence that disproves creation. Everything in the fossil record actually would prove more so what we're saying, that it was created, just like that evolutionary symposium in 1980 said that no, they come fully formed, exactly how we see them, and then they're extinct or they still continue. That's it. All the evidence points to creation. If we look at it, it all points to creation. That everything was here. It was created as is, just how God intended. In fact, it is more scientific to assume a direct creation because the fossil record shows creatures that are fully formed. The millions of fruit fly experiments have demonstrated this. No matter what is done to the fly, no matter how many genetic mutations are produced, it is still a fruit fly and no new beneficial organs appear. And they use the fruit fly because they go through their whole life cycle like in a matter of days. I think it was 3 days or something, or it might have been even less than that. So they could see multiple generations really quickly and see what happens to them as they perform all these mutations on them. They had, some of them with like 4 wings and all this stuff, or 6 wings and 2 heads and all these just mutations of them, but nothing was beneficial. None of the information that came out in the mutations was any new information. Remember, natural selection can only do what? It can only select from the information that's already there. It doesn't add information. So mutations are only going to take from the information that's already there. It's not going to bring new information in. Thus, actual scientific experimentation has demonstrated that genetic mutations could not have produced the myriad of wonderful life forms that exist. Homology is used as evidence at the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History's whale evolution display. The ankle bone of a deer is shown beside the ankle bone of a Rhodocetus with the following statement. Similar ankle bone assemblies in this deer and in early whales strongly indicate their ancestral relationship. So the deer is on the left, the Rhodocetus is on the right. Okay, and it says, look, I mean, you read that. What are you thinking? Man, a whale and a deer have similar ankle bones. They must be related, right? I don't know what whale they're talking about. I've never seen a whale with ankles, but right? Do we see the assumptions that they're making? Like the assumptions. So here it is. The statement is based on evolutionary assumptions rather than scientific evidence. First, there's no proof that Rhodocetus was a whale. See, that's the assumption they're making. Like we know for a fact already this thing was a whale. So therefore, look at how similar it is to a deer. Common ancestor, right? Second is we have seen similarity of structure between creatures itself is not evidence for evolution, nor is it evidence against common design. It would be reasonable for the creator to use similar structures and processes in creatures designed to live in the same environment. That just makes sense, right? Many uses for wheels, gears, and many different machines simply because they work well. Like we use them all the time. The same basic idea in so many different pieces of equipment that we create, that we have designed, right? I saw a picture of a hand designed by artificial intelligence, and you could tell it's like a robot hand. You can see it. And then next to it, it has a picture of a human hand with the skin removed, so you can see all the tendons and everything. And it makes a statement something like this, one, we attribute to artificial intelligence and know that there was a creator. But this one that's more complex, our hand, just happened by chance. No creator, no design in that. Well, where did artificial intelligence even make that robotic hand from? Where did it get the idea from? The human hand, right? One was created, designed, had intelligence behind it. The other one was pure happenstance, right? That doesn't make any sense. 3, there are creatures today that live on land and in the water. Finding a fossil of a creature that appears to have lived on land and in the water does not prove evolution. The sea lion, seal, and alligator do that today, but they are not considered missing links. God made all sorts of creatures. 4, consider how miraculous it would be for a wolf to evolve into a whale. This is pretty good. There are 79 species of whales, from the finless porpoise measuring 4 feet long to the blue whale measuring 100 feet and weighing 360,000 pounds. Its tongue is the size of an elephant. That's huge. Its heart the size of a small car. A human could swim through its aorta. That's how big that thing is. Okay, the sperm whale dives easily to 3,000 feet, where pressure is 100 times that of sea level. It has a huge chamber filled with sperm oil, which changes according to depth and temperature to adjust buoyancy. Its blood contains 50% more hemoglobin than humans to carry oxygen. During a dive, 90% of the whale's oxygen comes from its blood and muscles and tissues through special biological mechanisms. The pelvic change. So I have asked evolutionists to draw the skeleton of a creature of which the pelvis and hind legs are anatomically midway between the state that prevails in whales on the one hand and a land animal on the other. Okay, so the transition that they say took place when it's halfway between one and the other. Where is that? Can you draw that for me? No one has accepted the challenge, and a fossil of such a creature has not been found. Dr. Douglas Dewar. So no one's accepted the challenge. Why? Because how are we going to account for that? Why would it do that? Why would it be? It's a mutant at that point. It couldn't really survive in either place. So why is it going to do that? How's that beneficial for it if survival of the fittest dictates that, I'm going to change to what's best for me, right? How does that benefit it when it's not good in land or water? It's crippled. A baby whale. This is interesting. Baby whales must nurse underwater. If they had to nurse the usual way, they would either drown or starve to death. The mammary glands of the mother whale are equipped with muscles which enable her to rapidly squirt milk into the baby's mouth under great pressure. This is from Dr. Dwayne Gish. The fossils still say no. The baby whale's mouth fits snugly into his mother's body so the seawater doesn't get mixed with the milk, and its windpipe is elongated above the gullet so milk cannot flow into its lungs. This design had to be perfect. Think about this. It had to be perfect in both the mother and the baby from the very first time a baby whale was born. If not, guess what? Your second generation isn't going to happen. So if you don't have a second generation, you won't have a third generation and a fourth generation. So how did evolution know that needed to be like spot on first time? How did it know? Why would it do that? When the method of feeding on land was working just fine, why would it change to that all of a sudden? See, these are the problems that they don't tell you, they don't show you, they don't use critical thinking for even when they're presenting this stuff, when they're falling for it, when they're believing it. And this is sadly what happens in most teaching environments. Most students shut their brain off. Okay, they just take for granted what the teacher's saying, and yeah, they're the expert, they know, and they're going to go with it. And I can tell you, I know that from experience because I've been pastoring long enough, teaching and preaching the Word of God, that people don't know what they believe. They just yeah, pastor says that. Now you start asking them, well, what do you believe? Teach me what you believe. They can't do it. Or it's very generic. They just accept what's given to them rather than searching the scriptures daily to see if those things are so. That's just mankind. That's our laziness. We don't want to. It's just easier to just listen to you and I'll take your word for it. I trust you. And then get mad when something's said that you don't like. Okay, that's another story. All right. So how did this happen? Why would it happen unless it was by design? Number 5, vestigial hind legs is a myth. Thomas Huxley, no doubt, whales had hind legs once upon a time. That's once upon a time. Isn't that how you start fairy tales? Once upon a time, right? He said, no doubt whales had hind legs once upon a time. We know it happened. We don't know when, we just know it. A very small percentage of sperm whales have vestigial leg bones, and some even have bone-supported bumps protruding from their body. Prentice Hall Biology. The alleged hind legs, there's a picture of them in the whale, okay, are actually bones that are not attached to the whale's skeleton. The whale has no sign of a pelvis or any mechanism that has anything to do with vestigial legs. It does have those bones though. The bones in question actually strengthen the reproductive organs and are different in males and females. They make it possible for them to reproduce. That's what those are for. Okay, every piece of the evolutionists' vestigial organ argument has fallen apart over the last century. It's been disproven. Whale evolution is a myth. Genesis 1:21, and God created great whales and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind. And that is the end. All right.